Good day, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Reading with Ayo. This is actually the 40th episode, and I can't believe it. We are on the 40th episode of Reading with Ayo. It felt like yesterday. And, it's really important for me because I didn't even know there was a big landmark until I started recording this. So, and what a great gift to have to share this moment with my friend, David. David has been a big supporter of mine, big supporter of Reading with Ayo. But it's a great because actually we're talking about a book that David, gave me the opportunity to write a foreword on. So clashing with the 40th episode is a great thing. But before I start, I want to just say thank you, David, for giving me the opportunity to just write that foreword. But I just want you to introduce yourself to everybody and introduce the book.
Thanks, Ayo. So I'm happy to be here for the second time. So this is my second time on Reading with Ayo.
The first time. Third time. You came with the search, remember?
Yeah. We came the first time I was here, the fourth time, that's true, because we divided into 3 episodes. But the first time I was here, we talked about the book I was going to write. And today we talk about the book that I wrote. So I'm excited. Thanks for giving me the opportunity again. And thank you so much for writing the foreword to the book, because it's awesome. And the story that you tell really does an excellent job of representing, why I call this book The Extrovert's Guide and why I wrote it to extroverts. The way you articulated your story and that personal story of discovery is really what I intended for every extrovert to get out of the book. So thank you for creating such a wonderful foreword.
No, thank you very much, Stevie, for that opportunity. So one thing, first time I met you, I used to see you on the corridor of the same floor we used to work on. Then I had this great opportunity to work with you. And then as a leader, I didn't even know you were an introvert. But what you did after working with you is what really amazed me the most. And that is an opportunity of like, oh, I really like that guy. And, that's what leadership is, because a lot of people don't do it. You actually, I didn't have to ask for it. You actually wrote me a feedback without even me asking for it. In the times where everybody's asking for feedback now, you have done that. So I just wanted to give you opportunity of how you impacted me as we do that. So let's talk about the book.
Cool.
The Extrovert's Guides to Elevating Introverted Leaders in the Workplace. I love the book. I love the concept. I love everything you've done with this space. And there are people that they do stuff and I'll be like, but when I saw you started in this space, I knew you were genuine. And I just wanted to say, man, this is a great book. I've read it before. I've read it, the edited version, and I've read the real copy. This is a great book. I love reading it. And I just want to tell you, tell us why you wrote the book, because I think it's an important, one of the things I love to talk about is the why. Why did you write the book?
Sure. One of the interesting things about the book, so you had the opportunity to read the first draft, right? And when I wrote the first draft, it was very much about the issue, and it didn't really contain a lot about me or who I am. And I was working with a professional editor, and one of the best piece of feedback she gave me was, you need to tell your story. So when I rewrote the book, after her feedback, that's what I did, is I went in and I included a ton of information about my history. And it kind of gets into why I wrote the book. So I worked in corporate America for 30 years, part of it, with you directly. But from the day I started, and part of the story I tell is kind of leading up to corporate America and then what I discovered in corporate America. But from the beginning of my career, when I learned the first time I learned I was introverted, I started feeling these headwinds pushing against me for no other reason than the fact that I was quiet and reserved, and I like to think about things before I like to talk about them. And when you're young and don't know much, it can be a bit overwhelming and confusing. So I spent a long, and that feedback that I was getting to change my style from confident, quiet, a person of contemplation to outgoing and sociable, which was what was expected of me, was consistent. And it wasn't every supervisor, but if I look back in my career, and you can track this within the book, I have stories from the beginning, from the middle, from the end, and they all track the same. It's that same consistent feedback that if you're introverted, you're less capable as a leader. And the book, at its core, basically dispels that myth, because it is a myth. It's not. There's no factual. There are no facts that support extroverts being better leaders than introverts. In fact, I go out of my way to say personality type has no bearing on your skill as a leader. Whether you're extroverted, introverted, or somewhere in between, you can be great leaders. You can also be terrible leaders, and I talk about that too. I had bad leaders as well. But there was at some point within my career, especially later on, where I'd spent so much time working on myself, trying to figure out who I was, trying to improve myself as an introverted leader, trying to live up to those expectations of being extroverted, that I realized that none of that focus on myself really mattered. But I guess it did matter. I mean, it's probably not fair to say, because I improved, I stretched myself, I got better, but I was never going to get over that hump, that expectation for me to be extroverted. It just got stronger and stronger and stronger as time went on. And I realized that in order to change that, we have to engage the people in power within our workplace today, the people who control the bias that exists. And we have to bring the message to them and say, hey, something has to change. And in today's workplace, not every leader is extroverted, but if you look at the math, the numbers, the majority of leaders are extroverted. And if you're an introverted leader, there's a good chance you got there because you conformed to the expectation to act extroverted, and you were good enough at it that you were able to do it. So you have a few introverted leaders within corporate America, but you're often missing introverted behaviors. You'll have introverted leaders, but not introverted behaviors, if that makes any sense. So it comes down to this fact that nothing is going to change unless the people in power, one, know there is a problem, and two, are willing to change it. And that's why I wrote the book, and why I wrote it to extroverts, and why I called it The Extrovert's Guide.
Yeah. Now, because a lot of people have asked actually that question, I'm glad that you experienced that, you talked about that. And you at the beginning, you said, when you edited the book, you had to put a little bit of yourself into the book. Can you, I want you to tell us who David is and why why you felt into that, why you were introverted, and what helped you as a young person grow up. I know you talked about it in the book. I really love that part of the book, so I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I think, especially as a young person, as an introvert, you don't really consider yourself quiet, right? Because in your head, you have all these conversations going on in your head with yourself all the time. You're constantly thinking about things. You're constantly having these kind of internal discussions, and that's always happening. So you don't really think about, because your mind's not quiet. Mm-hmm. Your voice is quiet, right?
Yeah.
So you're constantly thinking, so you don't really think about it much. But I grew up in a very remote place in the United States, a very small school. I spent a lot of time by myself as a kid. I was one of 6 children, so it was almost like 2 families. The 4 older kids and the 2 younger kids were kind of raised in separate, because there was an age gap between us. So I was on a farm in the country, and when I wasn't at school, I was kind of by myself and wandering the countryside, kind of living my life. And I compare my life in the opening chapter to a book called My Side of the Mountain by Gene Craighead George. And I didn't realize it at the time, but what I realize it now is it was my favorite book growing up. And I always thought it was because of the outdoors and the camping and the kind of that thing. But it really, when I look back on it now and I reread it now, it's not about that at all. It's not about the similarity to my childhood and how I grew up. It's more about the fact that Sam Gribley, the character in the book, was, I think, an introvert himself, and really reveled in this idea that you could be by yourself and not be lonely, that you could thrive and be authentic and really enjoy your life and not have to be around a lot of people. And I think when I look back on it, I think that's kind of the connection that really made sense to me. Is I love that book because I was introverted, and it just resonated in my soul that that's kind of how I wanted to live and how I wanted to be on a day-to-day basis. And so I kind of the opening chapter really revolves around parallels between my life growing up and Sam Gribley, the main character of the book My Side of the Mountain. And then I go into talking about this idea that we all kind of live on a mountain. Even if we don't live on a real mountain, we all live on a mountain. And it's, what I call mountain personality type, but it's this mountain that exists within corporate America. And the one way to think about it is everybody understands the personality type spectrum, where you have introverts on one side, extroverts on the other side, and ambiverts in the middle. And we always draw it as a straight line, right? And we never really talk about where are you on the line? If you're a little bit introverted or a lot extroverted or a little bit, or kind of you can morph to be whatever you need. And we don't talk about how many people, the distribution of population along the line. So a better representation of the personality type spectrum, really, in my mind, is a bell-shaped distribution. So you still have the line with extroverts on one side, introverts on the other, and ambiverts in the middle. But with a bell-shaped distribution, you can see that the majority of the people were kind of in the center, right? And it looks like a mountain, so I call it mountain personality type, where you have introverts on this one slope, you have extroverts on the other slope, and you have ambiverts kind of right there in the middle. And so I go in and talk about the fact that we all live on this mountain in corporate America, this mountain personality type, and equate it back to some things like, I kind of come up with this other concept as well. There's something called extrovert behavior city, where most of the leadership jobs exist. And that on the mountain, that cities exist on the extroverted side of the mountain. So when an introvert wants to lead, they have to travel to the extrovert side of the mountain in order to lead, which means they have to act extroverted, and that's what's expected of them. And lots of people do that. And there's nothing really wrong with that choice, but it comes at a cost because it's exhausting. A lot of times it's hard for an introvert to be happy doing that because they don't feel authentic. And in order to recharge, they have to go back to their side of the mountain. Mm-hmm. And there's not an equal pressure for extroverts to go to the introverted side of the mountain and explore. That just doesn't exist. There's no reason for them to even look to see what it's like on that side of the mountain. So a lot of that first chapter is really setting up this analogy or metaphor that this distribution really is like a mountain, and kind of why we live on it, and we tie it back to my side of the mountain. Anyhow, so to me it just resonated a lot, and through that I tell my story growing up, kind of who I was, and kind of anchor the story on, this is who I am and where I came from.
That's my favorite part of the book right now, because seriously, people know me, and I'm going to tell people are going to be surprised, right? I'm extroverted. I'm not going to take that away. I'm not going to try, but I do my best work when I'm introverted. That's where I become curious. That's where I get to read a lot, because I can be in my house and be in my office all day and not talk to anybody. But when I'm out there, I'm the extroverted guy. So I understand that, being that part of the mountain. And then sometimes I'm the ambivert. I'm like, I'll go to an event and I'll just watch everybody and I'll just keep quiet and talk sometimes, move away. But everybody needs that time to recharge. And I know you talked about it. Even extroverts need time to recharge and they become introverted. And I just love that part of the story a lot. That's something I really love about the part of the story.